everyone. Namaste and welcome. Thanks for joining me. This subject matter is a very delicate one, so we're going to address it from the art of grace, acceptance, tolerance and awareness. We're discussing suicide and why. It's a very difficult subject to discuss, and I've no doubt that most of you who view this video will in one way or another have been touched by the hand of suicide. Whether it was an attempt that you may have made yourself, or whether you have suffered the loss of someone in your life close to you, be it a family member, a loved one, a friend, a work colleague, or whether you have also been involved with suicide at a level, whether you have been a facilitator in working with grief with people, or in trying to help people overcome the desire to commit suicide, such as a grief or counselling worker. Or you may have been involved with an attempted suicide, but a survival. There are so many different perspectives and portals that this discussion and ideology can travel along, and there's no one answer. And there's not necessarily just one way to perceive the concept and understanding and actions of suicide. We all have a particular feeling toward it, most likely due to the fact of our own interaction with it from our end. It comes down very much to our perceptions on our agreement of what suicide is, or what it shouldn't be, or why it exists, or where it leads to, or why it happens. The perception of the person who is not attempting suicide and who wishes the other party to be here in life, to remain, to live their life, whether it be you're a mother or a brother or a lover or a friend or a co-worker, your perception is very different from the person who is attempting to take their life or has attempted to take their life. In many ways, from both angles, whether you are the survivor of a suicide, as in you are a left behind loved one, or whether you were the person who committed suicide, your perception is inevitably selfish. It comes from a selfish perception of your own needs, of what you believe your own needs to be. I know as a mother myself with 2 sons, it is my belief that if ever they tried to commit suicide, I would say to them, no, you must stay. Life is so worth living. There's so much for you to learn and understand and to achieve and to experience, so much love and so much light. There is always a way out, and that would be my perception and my answer, not only to my sons but to anyone attempting to commit suicide. And I will forever always say that and always give that advice. Yet I can fully understand the perceptions from the other angles. I have never attempted suicide myself, and I doubt that I ever would. It's not something that I hold in my mindset, And I believe it's not a pathway that has been set for me in my life. It's not a path I have chosen. So if you see, this is partly where this extension or thought is headed. It's about the pathways that we select in life. It's about the reasons that we choose to do it. It's the same thing about all life. We design the life we're in. We design the choices we make. We design the experiences we wish to go through. Some of us will design to be a female in this life and have children. Some of us may design to be a religious follower or become a priest or a minister or a Buddhist teacher. Some of us may design to become a disabled person or a person with illnesses. Some of us may have chosen wealth. Some of us may have chosen to be healers and helpers. And some of us may have chosen to struggle, to go through events that have been traumatic and tiresome and wearisome. And yet when we're going through those events and when we are here on earth, we're dumbfounded by these choices. We say to ourselves, no, I would never have chosen to experience this. I would not have chosen to have gone through trauma and illness and poverty and deprivation and negativity and abusive relationships. And that's a point that in reality none of us can particularly argue in the here and now, because we seem to forget our true alliance, our true inspiration, the true reason why we come back to earth. We come back to earth to learn certain soul values, to experience things in our life that teach us, that progress our pathway, that progress our soul's evolvement, that take us to places of understanding and learning. There's also the karmic influence, the karma and the dharma. There's also family lineage, DNA, inheritance patterns that take place as well. In many ways, the choices that happen in one's life are very, very convoluted and very tied into many, many other forces and sources and pathways. There are many reasons too why a choice such as a suicide might be made in life, and it can definitely be tied into mental health issues, and that is very paramount and very aware in society, and no one would deny that. There's actually a really brilliant video on YouTube on one of the TEDx talks, and it's by a young man called Mark Hennick, who has actually survived suicide. His talk is inspiring and full of honesty, and is well worth listening to. And no one would ever suggest that what he says is not worthy of listening to. Because if anyone's pathway can be changed about deciding not to commit suicide, then that is the best option, I feel, and I always will. However, it was probably not that long ago that I was awakened to another understanding about why the soul makes the choices it does, and that in reality, as hard as this is to understand, we all have choices to make. As I said earlier, some of us choose to go through trauma or traumatic lives, or trouble with relationships or physical health, illnesses, disabilities, turmoil. Those things exist and they're part of our journey. They're part of our involvement. If a potential person has committed or is attempting to commit suicide and is disabled from that and is talked out of it through counselling, medication, or with support mechanisms in place, then that is exactly how it was meant to be. And that soul can go forward and move on with a lot of learning in place, and they can become great teachers and healers for others who are suffering the same issues. But for those that don't make it past the intervention and the attempts at saving a life and the counselling, the mediations, the work and the effort that's put into the souls, the people, the loved ones that try to take their lives, for those that aren't prevented from it, it's part of their journey. If we look at it from that perspective instead of from the other perspective, it's so hard to be left behind as a loved one wondering why, and how could I have stopped it, and how could I have helped it to not happen, when in reality it was a pre-set event that this person, your loved one, may have needed to experience to evolve their soul, to understand at some greater inner deep emotional level the entire principles of a suicide. For such a long time, especially when I was younger, I firmly believed that if anyone committed suicide, then their soul would be in torture, I suppose you could say, and that they would be inevitably aligning themselves to come back into this world again and to re-experience the same phenomena, to work through the trauma that they weren't able to work through when they committed the suicide, whether it be because they are depressed or have some deep underlying terrible trauma going on in their own lives, and that they would have to come back and relive it and work through it to enable their soul to grow. Now, like everything in life, there is always a duality or a duplicity or another side to the story. So in some cases, when it's not a preset or predetermined short lifespan by choice, but one that has rather been a decision that has been made on the spur of the moment here when it shouldn't be, then yes, the soul will come back again to realign through the trauma and pass through it in the real life, enabling them to gain other things such as strength and endurance and understanding and physical and mental capacity for living through extreme conditions. But for the soul that set themselves the journey of suicide, then when they take their life, their journey and that lesson is learnt, it is completed. And so their soul is not sent to purgatory or sent to hell or sent to torment or sent to come back and repeat the event. It raises itself to the next level for whatever that particular soul's choice of experiences are. So that when the soul comes back again, it will take a new path a lighter path, one without such torment, one without such angst, one without such fear and such depression. So you see, if we can always look at an event or an occurrence or a person or their soul from a different perspective than the one we currently view it, so a broader perspective, one with more vision and one with more scope and understanding and possibilities, then we can see the possible reason for these events to occur, and we ourselves, the ones left behind, may face less trauma in the acceptance and the understanding of that soul's journey. Now, as I say, it's a very, very delicate subject, and I don't wish to ever take away from grief and loss of people who have suffered a suicide in their life, or for anyone who has attempted suicide. As I said, if you are a survivor of an attempted suicide, then your path is exactly that. Your path is to move forward and become perhaps a teacher and a healer to others who are suffering in that moment of time, and that negativity that grabs us. And if you are a person who is left behind after the loss, the tragic loss from a suicide person, then again, my heart and prayers, love and light go out to you and your family and the one who took their life, to send healings and blessings. So I hope that this video might be, I don't know, sort of like an opening perhaps for people who are lost in the grief of wondering why does it happen. I have experienced suicide at some very personal levels, and that some of them have been extreme cases that will always haunt me, and I still find harrowing. And I guess my own soul has gone to the place of asking why. And I think I have asked so many different times that these answers have been brought forward for me to help ease the pain of wondering why that person chose to do what they did. So I suppose in many ways it's giving the survivor of the suicide a hope to go on knowing that that person's choice will lead them to a place of a rising awareness, of a better growth, of a soul that is more awakened, of a soul that understands more, of a soul that experiences more, of a soul that has learnt more, so that when they come back, they don't make that same choice ever again. And I think that's the greatest thing in life, is to understand that our own perception of an event or a cause or a person, of how we think they should be or who they should be or how they should act, is not up to us, but it is up to them. However, that aside, I fully follow the philosophies of seeking help, of finding a good mental health practitioner, and following as many steps applicable to support the healing of the mind in the here and now, as opposed to the here and after. I bid you all a very safe life journey. Much love, peace and light. Namaste.